Hammer 1, we're going in. Back us up.
Ready for deployment.
Ammo and weapons upgrades are available.
Hey guys, I'm Prodigy from Airsoft Team Kilo 23. When I'm shopping around for an airsoft gun, the externals come second. What matters to me is the internal build and quality. If a gun's internals can take a beating and can be upgraded and are decent, then I'll probably go for the gun. But how do you know if a gun's internals are actually worth their money or not? Now, we're going to start on a new tangent of Inside the Mechbox, where we're just going to check out the internals of airsoft guns, so you guys know whether or not they are worth the money or not. Today, we're going to check out the AIM-Top G36C. On this episode of Inside the Mechbox, we'll check out the guts of the gun and see whether or not the internals of the AIM-Top G36C are worth your buying or not. Disassembly of the AEG is pretty straightforward. Pop out the front body pin and take the handguard off. Then you can remove the center body pin and remove the mag well. Finally, remove the screws on either side of the pistol grip, here and here. Finally, fold the stock and remove this small Allen key screw. Now we can go ahead and remove the gearbox and the lower receiver of the gun. First, push the hop up forward and roll the lower receiver back. As you're removing the gearbox, don't forget to disconnect the small connector here. Now, before we continue disassembling the gun to the gearbox, let's check out the barrel and hop-up unit. Now, the barrel, the bucking, and the nub are really what makes up the accuracy of an airsoft gun. Now, the nub, this little guy, is pretty hard. It's a standard nub. It's not an H-style nub. It's not a concave nub. Just like most other AEGs include, it does a pretty good job. The bucking is a standard bucking. It's no harder and no softer than most stock buckings. The gun is shooting about 350 feet per second, so it accommodates that speed pretty well. The bucking itself was pretty dry. I was a little disappointed there, but it's nothing a little bit of silicone lubricant won't take care of. Now, the quality of the barrel is acceptable, even though it's not the greatest looking. The hop-up window is nicely enough cut. I'm sure it'll perform just fine. The barrel itself measures out to 247 millimeters, the standard length for a G36C. Flip it over here, you can see the barrel has no crowning whatsoever. This is just straight cut. However, I am happy that the inside of the barrel is pretty clean. I didn't actually find any trash in there, so I don't have to clean it right away, which is actually a great thing. Most AEG barrels I have to clean right after I get them out of the box. Now, I would surmise this is a standard 6.08 barrel. However, I have had other AIM-Top guns, their M4 series for instance, and those come with 6.04 barrels. So there really is no way to tell whether this is a 6.04 or a 6.08 or something in between. The gun does not come with an instruction manual that says what barrel it is. Now let's continue to disassemble the gearbox. There's a small pin here that you have to pop out, as well as the larger Phillips screw on the bottom of the pistol grip. Once those two items are out of the way, you can begin to slide the gearbox out of the lower receiver once you put it on semi-auto. Now there is a small spring here that will fall out. Make sure you don't forget where that goes. Now it simply comes down to removing screws and hardware from the gun. I'll go ahead and do that, then we can check out the internals of the gearbox. Now that I have the motor cage separated from the gearbox, let's go ahead and check out the motor. It does look very similar to other Chinese-made motors, so this is probably a standard, regular old, just throw in there, it'll pull an M100 spring fine motor. It has a steel pinion on it, which is, it's a plus. It has a little bit more torque than I'd expect from a standard Chinese motor, so that's good. You can also see the gun has about 18 gauge wire, which is typical for most G36Cs. Alright, now that I have the gearbox opened up, we can go ahead and check out the guts of the gun. Let's go ahead and start with the piston head, spring, and spring guide, because they're pretty much all connected. The spring guide is plastic. It has a couple little metal washers here. It's about average for a stock spring guide. The base is raised just a little bit. The spring feels like about an M90 or M100. The gun was shooting, like I said, about 340, 350 feet per second, so it's about average for one of these springs. It is tied into the kind of the locking nut that sits just behind the piston head, so the spring does not come out of the piston. That's also typical of a lot of stock AEGs. The piston looks like alright quality. The second to last tooth is not removed, so I might shave that down later. And the first tooth is steel, like most AEG pistons. The piston is ported. You can see it has, looks like 8 ports there. It's a little more than usual, but alright. The O-ring is actually quite a bit thinner than usual. It really flats around quite a bit, so I'm not really impressed with that. The cylinder head, nozzle, and tappet plate are next. The cylinder is brass and it's ported. The port is positioned just in the right spot for a good 247mm barrel, just for the G36C. Cylinder head is plastic, and it's pretty stuck in the cylinder, so you're not losing any air there. The G36 nozzle is a little longer than most nozzles, and it's got the bar on top here, which is, I don't know really what it does, but it's there. The nozzle does not have an internal O-ring, but it still gets a really good air seal. The tappet plate is, honestly, it feels a little weak, so I might want to replace that later on. Now, as I try to compress the piston, I just can't do it. It's got a perfect air seal. I've never seen this from a low-cost stock gun like this. The lubricant job is also worth noting. You can see the manufacturer probably just took a paintbrush with some pretty cheap brown Chinese lubricant and sprayed it all over the inside. It is adequate. It's better than most stock AEGs I've seen, but it could be a little better. Now, the gun does come with 6mm plastic bushings. These will work alright for the spring power that it comes with, and to be honest, you might want to upgrade these right away. I've never been a fan of plastic bushings, but they do work. Now, just as I remove the gears from the gearbox, I realize there are no shims whatsoever in this gearbox. So either Aimtop does not shim their guns, or they're trying to copy KWA in that they don't shim their gearboxes, and they're perfectly tuned so that you don't need shims. Despite the fact that the gears are not shimmed, they actually look like great quality. They're standard torque gears, so they're good, probably up to an M120 or M130 spring if you decide to upgrade it all. They did not have any lubricant on them whatsoever, except for a little bit on the top of the spur gear. You can see on the sector gear here that it has a extended delayer, so that's good. Just means your BB feeding will be a little more consistent when you go up to super high rates of fire. The switch assembly, lastly, looks like excellent quality. You could probably run a high voltage battery, lithium polymer battery on this gun for quite a while if you wanted to without installing a FET or anything else. The gun probably can take a LiPo battery for a while with the parts it has, but you really need to tune this gun stock if you intend to do that. Otherwise, I would really recommend using an 8.4 volt or 9.6 volt battery on this gun at the most. So now you're probably asking, what should I upgrade here? Well, I've got 5 things I think you should upgrade right away. The first thing I recommend is a tight bore barrel. They carry 6.04 and 6.02 barrels by Systema and Deepfire at airsplat.com. You can pick up one of those when you order the gun if you want. I also recommend getting a different bucking. This one is okay, but there are better ones out there. Airsplat carries the ICS bucking, which I think would work well in this gun. I would also replace the spring. I've never been a fan of springs that are attached to the piston heads, so probably an M100 or M110 spring would be good for this gun. Next, the spring guide. This one's okay. I've only had one plastic spring guide ever break on me, but I would really recommend getting a metal bearing spring guide just for a little bit of added durability. Finally, the bushings, the 6mm plastic bushings that come with the gun, they work, but you could do better. I would at least get some metal bushings in there. After taking the Aimtop G36C apart, I can officially say it's actually a pretty decent gun. Stock, it was tuned surprisingly well, very little gear noise, it was getting a very good FPS, 340 to 350 consistently. Had a good rate of fire of about 16 rounds per second on an 8.4 or 9.6. So, dang, $125 at airsplat.com, you really can't ask for a lot more in a stock gun. This is probably the least expensive G36C you can get your hands on. So go to airsplat.com, pick one up, go have a blast with it. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm Prodigy from Airsoft Team Kilo 23. This has been Inside the Mechbox.